Covered in fucking dirt and not one on.
I forgot to add my background. All right, hello, welcome. All right, so we'll maybe wait one more minute to give everybody a chance to join us, and then we'll get started. Okay. Should we get started, Lauren? What do you think? Sorry, I didn't see you.
All right, go for it.
Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. So yeah, welcome. Thank you for joining us for our workshop tonight. So we're going to do a workshop on STEM design for climate action. So STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. My name is Andrea Hemrick, and Lauren's joining us as well. We'll do a quick introduction of ourselves before we get started into the workshop. So can everybody see my screen at the moment? Let us know if you can't. Yeah, was that a yes?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. And once we get into it, it'd be really great if you're comfortable turning on your cameras. You can leave your microphones on unless there's background noise. But otherwise, we want this to be very much a participatory workshop. We're going to be sharing these slides with you so that you can contribute to the slides and participate on some surveys and that kind of thing as well. So, yeah. Okay. So just a little bit about myself. I am one of the co-founders of Up for the Challenge. I'm also an adjunct assistant professor in engineering, both at McMaster University and Queen's University. At McMaster, I teach design thinking, which is the process that we're going to take you through tonight, and the process that we use with Up for the Challenge in our youth initiatives in our programming. So there's a lot of overlap there in what I do, both with Up for the Challenge and the teaching in engineering. So I hope you have fun with this tonight. And I'm going to hand it to Lauren. She can introduce herself.
My name is Lauren Folk. I'm also one of the co-founders of Up for the Challenge. I also work as an associate traffic engineer at Peters and Yaffe, a transportation and traffic company. Actually, I'm located in Jacksonville, Florida. I moved since starting the group. Yeah, I work on things related to both design as well as traffic studies, and I'm very, very passionate about sharing what STEM can help achieve for positive social change.
Okay, so sorry, we're skipping ahead here. Before we actually get into what we do with Up for the Challenge and what we're going to do with you tonight in our workshop, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that we are coming to you as an Up for the Challenge is coming to you from Toronto, which is the dish with one spoon territory, and Ottawa, which is where we started, which is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. We respectfully acknowledge the past and present traditional stewards of the land and their unique role in the life of the region. Toronto is on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. And as settlers, we're grateful for the opportunity to live, work, and play in this territory. So what is Up for the Challenge? Well, we actually started Up for the Challenge in Ottawa, like I said, through an initiative through the Women in Science and Engineering group there. And what we wanted to do when we started this, a few of us came together and wanted to find different ways of engaging youth in STEM, especially trying to reach youth who are traditionally underrepresented in the science, technology, engineering, and math fields. And we kind of went back to why we got into these fields in the first place ourselves, which was really with the motivation to make society better and improve people's lives. And so that's really what we came back to with the initiative that we started and that developed into Up for the Challenge. So that's our mission. And how do we actually do that? Well, like I said, we use this design thinking approach, which is a human-centered approach to innovation that draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. And we always start with understanding the human needs. So what people want, what they need, and keeping that in the center of the design process throughout the process. The Stanford D School describes this process with these 5 stages. The first stage is to empathize with the end user, so really understand their needs. And only then can we define the problem from their point of view. And once we understand what the problem is, at that point, we can come up with lots of different ideas, prototype those ideas, and test out those ideas before we develop them into full solutions. And we know this is very much an iterative process. We're not going to get it right the first time, right? So being prepared to fail and learn from failure and improve as we go, always including the people at the center of the design process. So we're going to take you through that process tonight around the topic of climate change and how to make climate change and STEM accessible to youth. So we want to see if we can reimagine young people's learning about climate change. How might we make climate change topics and engineering relevant and meaningful to youth? So we're going to start asking you about some of your experiences and consider the impact of greenhouse gas emissions on our climate and weather patterns. So we think about what causes climate change. I think we've often talked about the science behind that, but what does it actually mean on a day-to-day basis? So think about what kinds of extreme weather we experience here in Canada. And maybe before we jump into the poll, just quickly, is there anybody who's joining us from outside Canada? All right, I don't see any hands up, so I'm assuming we're all local-ish. So think about what kinds of extreme weather we've experienced recently, over the last year, over the last couple of years. And take a moment, go to slido.com, and you'll see at the top a place where you can type in the event code Up4, and that will, the poll has been launched so that you can add in any number of as many extreme weather events as you can think of to the poll. So just see how many you can add, and we'll take about 2 minutes to do that. So I'm just going to switch. Hold on.
If anyone has any issues accessing the poll and word cloud, just feel free to either unmute yourself and say it here or send a message in the chat if you're having any issues.
Okay, hold on. There. All right, so we're just going to try and get as many of these extreme weather events as we can think of into our word cloud. Okay, I can see people are adding some different events specific to years. Okay, so we've got ice storms, snowstorms, hurricanes, flooding, heat waves, tornadoes. Montreal 98, I remember that one. Okay, great. So any last ones that you can think of? All right, so I'm going to end the poll and go back to the slides here. All right, so thank you, Lauren, for adding that to our slide deck here. All right, so the next thing I want you to think about are our needs and motivations. So meaning the impact of these extreme weather conditions on our everyday lives, right? So if you think about how this might impact our food, housing, potentially transportation, health and well-being, we put down a few examples of how this might impact sustainable diets, food waste, affordability around housing or indoor air quality, transportation. When I did this workshop last week with students, we were talking about snowstorms impacting school buses getting to school, vehicle emissions, accessibility, and just generally our health and well-being. So there are a lot of things that we could talk about in terms of these issues. The next poll is just going to ask you which of these social issues you think youth are most passionate about. Which issues are most important to them? So you can go back to slido.com and share your, rank your answers there. So just start that poll. There we go. Okay, is that working for everybody?
Yes, it's a drag and drop. You can pull them up into the box at the top and in the order, the ranking order that you think is most important.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm seeing an update now on my screen, so. All right. Any last votes. Okay, so I'm seeing housing is ranked as number 1. Food, sustainable diets, food waste is a close second, and then health and well-being. And maybe transportation is less so. Yeah, okay. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to share the link to the slides in the chat window.
I've got it, Andrea.
Oh, you got it. Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Step ahead of me. And so you can access the slides that we're working on. What we're going to do next, hold on, I'm just going to go back to my screen share. There we go. Is define or design challenge. Okay, so normally we would spend a little bit more time talking to people to really understand what the issues are that they're most passionate about. We're doing this pretty quick, going to take you through this process really quickly tonight. So we're going to define it like this. Our community needs a way to mitigate or adapt to the impacts of extreme weather, either at home or at school, while also considering the impact on our everyday lives. So the impact on housing was ranked number 1. Food, I think, was ranked number 2, health and well-being, possibly transportation. So looking at those issues and thinking about what that looks like either at home or at school, and possibly focusing on one of the extreme weather events that we talked about. So snowstorms, heat waves, whatever that might look like. And we're going to ask you, there we go, to come up with some how might we statements. And so we do this in the design thinking process to launch our brainstorming. So we want to come up with some statements that are still sort of open-ended, that aren't thinking about a specific solution, but might address that design challenge, right? How can we mitigate and adapt to the impacts of extreme weather while also considering these social issues that we've identified? Okay, so if you can go to these slides, the how might we statement slides on the slide deck, and start adding your ideas to the slide itself. Okay, so just starting out, how might we, and some examples are improve access to sustainable diets without the loss of natural habitats, or how might we mitigate the impacts of extreme weather like snowstorms or heat waves at school, for example. Okay, so we're going to take a few minutes, take about 5 minutes or so, to see how many how might we statements we can add to the slides. Does anybody have any questions about that? All right.
Can you guys give a thumbs up if you're able to access the slides? I just want to make sure that people are able to access it. Or a verbal confirmation works too.
All right. Thank you, Sean.
All right, and the slide 11 is the first slide where we can start writing. Go ahead and add to the.
Yes, I see people joining, so that's great. And there are 3 slides in case we really got on a roll. See if we can fill up all 3 slides with how might we statements. All right, we've got some great ones going here. So maybe we'll take 1 more minute to finish up our last thoughts around the how might we statements. All right. Okay, so I'm just going to read them out. So the first 2 are examples. Then we had somebody said, how might we encourage youth to pursue an active lifestyle? How might we ensure equitable access to nutritious food in a changing climate? How might we adapt our existing school buildings in a changing climate? How might we make transportation to school safer during a snowstorm? How might we provide more affordable housing options in a resource-responsible way? And then our next one, how might we find more energy-efficient ways to cool off during the summer? How might we protect our community gardens from flooding or excessive rain? How might we promote mental health in youth? How might we improve access to healthy foods that are grown sustainably and are affordable? And how might we teach about climate change without causing climate anxiety? That's a great one. And last one, how might we improve the transportation of resources while reducing the cost, labor, environmental impact? So we've got lots of great ideas there. Maybe we can, Lauren, if you don't mind, moving the one on the last slide up to the second slide there.
I did, it's just not showing in your slides yet.
Thank you.
Got a bit of a delay.
Perfect. Okay. I wonder if that's also because when I'm sharing, I think it takes a while. But anyway, as long as everybody can see it there. What we're going to do now is have you rank the how might we statement. So based on the rankings, we're going to go into our brainstorming session and brainstorm around some of these how might we statements.
This ranking can be based on which how might we statement you're most interested or passionate about brainstorming for a solution for. Which do you feel like is really meaningful or impactful and important?
And I think given our numbers, we might do this all together in just a big group. And so, you know, if you want to sort of pick your top 3, and then the one that gets the most votes is the one that we can work on all together. You think that works?
Just go ahead and put like a tally or some kind of mark in the preferences category beside the ones that you're most interested in.
All right, so we've got 1 star. Well, I can see 1 star at the moment around how might we make transportation to school safe during a snowstorm. What else? 1 star at how might we improve access to healthy foods that are grown sustainably and are affordable. And 1 at how might we improve the transportation of resources while reducing the cost. So labor, environmental impact. Okay, I see more stars being added. Perfect. Keep going. No cheating, 3 stars, I think we said, right? I'm just kidding. All right. So it looks like, to me, at this point, I've got 1 that is the most popular. How might we improve access to healthy foods that are grown sustainably and are affordable? So if there's anybody who somehow didn't get a chance to vote, or if you're seeing something different, if mine hasn't updated properly, let me know. But otherwise, we can highlight this one as our
Andrea, I think it's when you're sharing your screen that it's not updating. I think otherwise it seems what you're saying I am seeing as well.
Good. Okay. All right. So I will go back to the screen share and let you take over the slides. There we go. Okay, so brainstorming. So this is where we get into the fun part. We're going to try and come up with as many ideas as we can. And so we've got a few different slides for this. We're going to try and sort of work together on 1 slide as a group. But if we need more space, we can shift to some of the other ideas, or sorry, other slides, depending on how many ideas we come up with. What we want to do here is really come up with as many ideas as we can without really holding back, thinking about, you know, what might be feasible or cost effective. We're not judging ideas at this point. We're just going for wild ideas, trying to come up with as many as we can, right? Seeing if we can each come up with 10, 20, maybe as a group, 50 ideas. And we really want to be building on each other's ideas. Okay, so this is the moment where, you know, if you want to turn on your cameras or microphones, where we're chatting about our ideas and also getting them down on the slides. So if we're looking at the slides here, we can add text to the documents, or we can, you know, if you want to grab images and do a screen capture, add some images that describe what your ideas are, and then paying attention to what everybody else is saying as well, because that helps kind of inspire the new ideas. Any questions about the brainstorming? All right. So, so we're going to take 10 minutes for this. And so we really want to brainstorm around this idea of how might we improve access to healthy foods that are grown sustainably and are affordable. And again, we can think about what this might look like at school or what this might look like at home. Okay.
I'm curious,
Okay.
is the person who wrote this "How might we" statement, or does that person want to expand on either what prompted them to think of that idea or what they had in mind when they thought of that "How might we" statement? No worries. It looks like we may have lost a person or two, so it's possible they were one of the people.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. So, okay.
We've already got ideas showing up in the brainstorm, which is great.
Okay, good. There we go. Yeah, I need to go out of slideshow mode for all of that to show up for me. Awesome. Okay, encourage growing food locally, easier access to community gardens, expanded community gardens to rooftops. Yes, food share programs with local farms. Here, I'm going to add some. I've actually got my students at McMaster working on a very similar project, so I'm going to steal some of their ideas as well. All right. I like that we've got some pictures being added here. So, building more greenhouses, accessible to the public. Yeah. And the last photo, does somebody want to share what they have in mind with this? I think I'm making an assumption. So rather than me making an assumption, I'm just gonna ask.
This one was kind of along the idea of, if different people have access to different foods, is there a way of sharing that to get a greater diversity? Kind of like the meal sharing idea, but potentially bigger than just with your neighbors or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So food share programs with local farms, and then what does that look like in the community as well? So. All right. So greenhouses, yeah. gonna add a few more pictures as well. Okay. All right, so as you're finishing up your last ideas here, we can come back to this. What we would normally do now if we had a few groups, so if we were working in a class with 25 to 30 students, we would be working in smaller groups, and we'd ask each group to share some ideas and give some feedback on the ideas. So we've got the slide 16 on giving feedback, where we suggest that people give feedback in the format I like, I wish, what if. So if anybody wants to ask any questions about the ideas that are out there, or share some feedback with other people in the group,
feel free to add it in the chat on Zoom, as well as unmuting yourself and sharing as well. We'd love to hear your ideas.
Yeah. All right, I'm just going to check the chat. That is working.
Does anyone have any experience with community gardens or gardening in more of an urban environment?
Very quiet group.
It is Monday. I remember when we did one of our first workshops, it was really interesting to see kind of like, was it hydroponics, Andrea, that the school classroom was doing, or that the community group was doing?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember if that was what the tower was called. There was a specific name for it, but I've forgotten now. Is that the one you're talking about?
The students were helping to actually make the system, weren't they?
Not the students that we were working with, but I think they started working with University of Ottawa engineering students to help design an actual tower that would fit better in the Parkdale Food Center to address their needs at the actual food center. So yeah, that was pretty cool. So what we're going to do next is take our ideas and, oh, I'm not sharing anymore. Hold on, I'm going to go back to my screen share. Moving on to prototyping. All right, there we go, loaded. Okay. So we're going to start with a really low fidelity prototype. And so when we go through the cycle, we start with low fidelity prototyping because it makes it really easy to throw away ideas that aren't working, and kind of move on and iterate on those design ideas before investing too much time and effort and becoming too attached to any ideas. And so a storyboard is a really low fidelity type of prototype that we often use, where we just want to draw or add images to describe the end user's reimagined experience. Okay, so we sort of start out, this is very simple format with just the three images and or frames, I should say, starting out with what the current scenario is. So what do people experience now? So if we're thinking about students at school or youth at home, what is the current experience related to the issues around extreme weather and the impact on our everyday lives? And how does our solution that we've come up with, these ideas, how do they come together in this reimagined experience to create an improved experience for students or youth in this scenario? We can add a title to our design solution, a bit of a description, and really are sharing that story, telling that story of what that looks like. Okay, so if you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, we're going to take a few minutes to create our storyboard now. So as much as possible, we want to be using images with a little bit of text just to kind of help describe what the scenario is, what the story is all about. All right, so first image. I see somebody's added an image. I'm going to take some guesses here. So if I'm getting it wrong, just let me know. But I think we're starting out with a scenario that we're in a school cafeteria and we've got a student maybe getting some unhealthy fast food kind of type foods, chicken fingers, French fries, maybe deep fried. I don't know. Am I getting it right? I think the other image that I'm going to add in there, if I can, is what I've heard a lot about is how long the lineups are sometimes at school cafeterias and how expensive the food can be if in terms of, if they're looking at other options outside of school. Oh, sorry, try to make my image small here. Okay. All right, so then I see somebody has added another small image. Looking at their grocery bill. Yes, I think that's probably a common sight these days with our rising food prices.
And Andrea, building on what you said, how not just the grocery store, but also say in a school cafeteria, or the options that students have access to.
Yeah. Okay. So now in the second frame, I see an image of, it looks like youth working in a garden together, which looks great. So I'm going to ask, where is that? At school, at home, somewhere in the neighborhood?
I was thinking more in a school context, possibly.
Right. Somebody included, I think, in one of the ideas, I'm just going back to the slide now, rooftop gardens, which I think is a great idea. And so when you build it out like this in a prototype, sometimes the other thing that happens is that you sort of start realizing that there's some other questions that we might need to address as well. And in this case, I'm sort of thinking, you know, is there something that we can design to protect these gardens that we have in a, you know, extreme weather event? Let's say, you know, something like a mini tornado that ripped through Ottawa. Was it last year? The year before? So maybe some sort of shelter structure, possibly. So I see more images going up. It looks like the bottom one that was just added was a way to build up and potentially, I'm just guessing here, but it almost looks like you can take the plants that are in those pots and maybe move the pot. So another solution to that extreme weather event, if you know it's coming, if you can predict it, would be to take those pots inside, let's say temporarily. Again, I'm just guessing here, but this is a nice thing about the ideation process, is sort of inspired by what people had. Sorry, Lauren, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I think that's a.
Yeah. Okay. And then I'm just checking the time here. Okay. Okay, good. We're good for time, so we can take a few more minutes to finish this up. So the last frame, I see what looks like potentially a student carrying a cafeteria tray with healthy food options. I see another image going up. Other plants in a pot.
That one was kind of meant to highlight, given if you're doing indoor gardening, how do you kind of account for some of the needs of plants, such as like a growing light or other related technologies that can help make it more successful indoors.
Cool. Okay. Add one more here. Okay, anybody want to come up with a title for a design solution? My daughter's great at coming up with creative titles. I don't think she gets it from me though. Put in a brief description here. So
One thing that I also added to the reimagined experience was kind of an image representing the kind of the pride students can take, and if they're becoming more involved in potentially like growing their own food or having success at contributing that in that way, the not just the eating good foods part of being healthy, but also from a confidence perspective as well.
That's great. I like that image. And make it a little bigger. Sorry. There we go. Hold on. I'm going to add a wide variety of healthy. Okay. So I put, feel free to change the description. Community garden, rooftop, schoolyard, backyard is protected from severe weather and grows a wide variety of healthy foods. Students are proud to participate. So there's our reimagined story. So what we would do then at this point is, you know, if we're working with students, they would take the opportunity to share the storyboard with, let's say, other students at school, and get their ideas, get their feedback on coming up with some of these ideas. You know, what if we were to actually design a rooftop garden here at our school? What would that look like? What kind of foods would you want to grow? That kind of thing, in order to take that prototype and the feedback to, you know, through the next iteration. What would your design, how would your design change? How would we improve the design to meet the needs in the school community? How might the needs of students be different from staff or other members of the school community, for example? Okay. So go back to my screen share. Lauren, did you want to add anything to that before we move on to the next part of our workshop?
No, I think that's good.
Okay.
I guess maybe also the protected from severe weather part could also possibly be, does it need to be movable or transformative in what the actual method or location of the food growing thing? Is this something that can be moved indoor and outdoor? Is there a component that a roof can come up over top of the rooftop garden to protect it during certain types of weather? So kind of the word transformative is coming to mind, but I don't know if that's necessarily quite the right word, but just the idea of maybe of movement or the adaptability potentially of the actual garden space.
Yeah, I think also, you know, if there are plants, I actually don't know that much about gardening, but I think I have enough enough knowledge to know that, you know, if school's out for summer and nobody's kind of tending to the garden at school, let's say, that some of those plants might not do so well. So maybe in that instance as well, you know, do you want to transport the plants somewhere else, or how might you address that issue of making sure that other people are involved in that process as well? Okay, so now based on the storyboard that we created, we are going to talk a little bit about the impact of our design. So hopefully you can all see our stem flower here. So what this is a way to identify the social outcomes of our design. So around the petals of the stem flower, we want to identify what we did for the end user of the design. Okay, what were the benefits to people using the design, to people in the community, students, staff, neighbors, And we're going to add those around the flowers of the design. And then we're also going to look at how we actually implement this design. What do we need to actually make this work and make it something that we can actually use, let's say, at school? So what are the science, technology, engineering, math pieces that support the design? And we're going to add those around the roots of the stem flower. So anything that we need to, let's say, create the next iteration of the design, or to actually, get a working functional prototype built at the school. Okay. So let me know if you have any questions about that. Otherwise, I'm going to stop my screen share and we can start
Cool.
adding.
We've already got answers, Andrea.
Perfect. Okay.
Andrea, I also think if you share your screen not in presentation mode, it may also make it more updated.
Yes. Okay. Here, I'll share it now, and that way I can keep adding to it.
We're gonna need more of these.
All right. We've got lots of answers going here. So some of the benefits, the social outcomes of our design, healthy. So healthy food, healthy people. It's affordable. It creates a sense of community. Pride, yes, pride in what you have achieved. Teaches skills, great. Some of the STEM concepts that we've got, tools, soil, seeds to actually do the planting, the enclosure, environment and management systems, food science, soil, pH, chemistry. It's also thinking biology. I'm going to add to food science, nutrition. We've got design, architecture. Got the anonymous beaver adding some notes. Thank you. Architecture of the garden. Yeah. Vertical, horizontal.
Also rooftop gardens, I know from some of my design classes that I've taken in the past, it's like there's a lot of weight associated with a rooftop garden. So making sure that either if you're building a new building or if you're retrofitting, how can you account for that extra load, or are there ways you could lessen the load possibly?
Right.
With like material choices, things like that.
And that reminded me of just what somebody else was talking about recently, and just in terms of runoff and just making sure. I mean, I think another benefit of the garden is that in some of these extreme, like weather events with a lot of rain coming down in a short amount of time, you don't have as much runoff going directly into, in my case in Toronto, Lake Ontario, that it's actually absorbed in the garden or in the ground before making its way.
As a positive or a negative?
As a positive. Yeah.
Even potentially helping to reduce things like flooding if there's a large amount of
Exactly.
rain or snow melt in a specific period of time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Are there any other social outcomes we can think of? We have kind of the very the healthy foods, but I wonder if maybe if we think even bigger picture outside the box, is there something else that this possibly could contribute to?
Not sure if that's the right term right off, but I think you know what I mean. Yeah, I would say, I mean, potentially there are people in the community who maybe feel, I don't know if to say safer is a little bit extreme, but if you know, if we're worried about the high cost of food and, you know, what might happen, especially if you're really relying on a community garden, and you know that these extreme weather events happen, that knowing that your garden is protected might make you feel more secure. That's probably a good way.
A very literal interpretation of food security.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just going back to what our brainstorming ideas were.
And I think actually I'm just going back to the what is it, slide 8, experiences, smog air quality. So even having more gardens would probably reduce the poor quality, or maybe it sort of improve the quality to a small extent, but I guess every tree counts, every plant counts, to improve the actual air quality.
Even just maybe air quality in schools.
It's, yeah, in school, especially if it's indoor.
Yeah. That also made me think of like if we're looking at rooftop gardens, the idea of lessening the heat island effect, where with cities having so much typically pavement and dark buildings, they often, their temperature can be significantly higher than other areas. So if you're changing the color from asphalt or the dark roofing materials to green, it can potentially help lower the temperatures during the hottest times of the year.
Yeah. And that actually reminded me, I was up on the CN Tower not too long ago, and just looking at how beautiful it actually looks to see the rooftop gardens when you're looking down. I am always amazed at how much green space there is in Toronto. I think we've done that quite well.
That also makes me think of potentially giving people or students the chance to interact with nature or greenery, potentially in, if they're living in an urban environment, say like in Toronto, where maybe their access to interacting with or experiencing kind of nature and outdoors might be more limited, giving them a chance to do that, which has been shown to have positive impacts on like mood and mental health.
Yes. Yeah, and I think somebody did bring that up on one of the slides at some point. Maybe it was one of the how might we statements. And the other thing you just remind me of something else now. Oh, I just lost my thought. It'll come back to me. Oh, food waste. That was another one that came up at some point. So all of the food waste can now be composted and used in the garden. There's another benefit. So reduce
And
the
the
actual
STEM component of, I'm going to call it composting. I know it's more, I guess it would be, that would involve things like chemistry and biology with regards to like the structure and breakdown of food waste.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to add in the STEM as maybe one last one related to the one around mood and mental health, maybe psychology. There we go. All right. Very impressive. Okay, so I will go back to my slideshow mode. Looks great. Okay. So yeah, that's the general template of our stem flower. So we wanted to ask at this point, what do you think are some of the most important social outcomes that we came up with tonight? Again, maybe just put your answers in the chat. If there's one or two that stood out to you as sort of the most important social outcomes of the design. Any responses? Lauren, you got any favorites?
Typing in the chat.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say food security from both having access to it. So if students know that they have access to this at school, having that level of security, as well as potentially how you had mentioned the idea of it being secure in the sense, or maybe more secure in the sense that there would be methods or procedures or structures put in place to kind of make it as secure as possible given extreme weather or changing climates, etc. Kind of that adaptability potentially of this is a means of growing and sharing healthy foods.
Mm-hmm. And I think that adds to both our physical and mental health. And then were there any unexpected or sort of surprising STEM concepts that came out of the design when we started thinking about how to actually implement it? So feel free to add to the chat, turn on your microphones, share.
And just so everyone knows, in case I don't, the chat feature is just along the very bottom of the screen of the window. You'll see there's a little chat bubble box. If you click on that, that will pop up the chat. If anyone wants to add anything in there. Andrea, was there one that stood out to you?
I'm gonna stop my share and go back to what we had. Sorry. I did this on 2 monitors before and that worked better. Hold on.
Oh, we've got the environment management system.
Yeah.
Why did that surprise you, or why do you think that one was the most interesting, or what about that?
I don't know very much about that. I'm kind of curious to know more, actually. And I think the other one that I was kind of curious about was design architecture of the garden. So looking at what that might look like. This I'm interpreting this in terms of vertical or horizontal, or what other shape might we consider in the space that we're looking at, what would make sense, and how can we get creative about that, and how would we make it work structurally and also physically accessible. How would you make that work for maybe people who have physical disabilities, but even just sort of looking at involving different people in the community. So I think there's kind of a lot in that could be explored.
I see in the chat, Sean, I believe your name is Sean, added more about that environmental management system, managing humidity content in the air, temperature in the greenhouse, essentially maintaining the best possible environment for plant growth. Yeah. I'd be curious also, if we were doing it in like a classroom, how do you balance what's best for the plants if that's different than what's best for students living in the classroom? Does it need to be contained separate from the main classroom because it is so different than what students would need, or are there ways that it could be beneficial to both?
Or how do you create different environments if we were actually going to grow foods from different parts of the world that might address different cultural needs? How do you make sure that you've got the right climate, sort of microclimate for different plants, let's say?
Yeah.
And that, when you were talking about that, I was thinking that introduces thermodynamics, one of my favorite subjects in engineering. So we've got a few more things to chat.
The topic is escaping me, but also like how much like the water content in the air, what makes, like if you live in a non-humid place, how do you make humid air if that's what you need? Or if you live in a very humid place, how do you dehumidify it to make it? We have more in the chat talking about when building vertically, gardens are more economical as there can be more plants per square meter. Says air quality in greenhouses are generally better than in classrooms, but it's usually a lot more hot and humid. Yeah. As someone who lives in a relatively hot and humid place, I can say that if I had to learn all the time in that environment, it may not be the most enjoyable, but also, again, here seeing how much stuff can grow all year round or more frequently, kind of seeing how, yeah, that does seem very much reflected in that a larger, longer growing season or better conditions for things to grow. So maybe there would be a way to, if it was slightly separated, where you could keep the temperature and the humidity in the greenhouse or that area of a classroom or school somewhat contained, but then maybe there was a system to like pump the air from that to other parts of the school to kind of share that improved air quality.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I was also thinking, how do you do some of that more efficiently so that you're not further contributing greenhouse gases by creating that kind of environment? So
it's not directly related, but I know from like an architectural standpoint, like the idea of passive design, where it's like a lot of it's the idea that it's like, okay, this is meant to, we have to heat this and we have to cool this, but are there ways you can position your windows or position your ventilation to naturally allow for more comfortable living spaces? And I wonder if how the concept of passive design could be used and applied into potentially growing plants indoors.
Mm-hmm. I think as we start talking about it, I'm just sort of building on those ideas and thinking as well, and just in terms of the school environment, can we also incorporate elements of play? So if we were going to do this with young kids, You know, could you build in a playground as part of that garden somehow? Indoor playground, I don't know what that could look like, but yeah, anyway, it's fun to think about. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go back to my screen share here. There we go. So we wanted to share just a little bit about the impact that we're making with our programming. So Up for the Challenge is really geared towards students in grades 7 to 10 primarily. We often also work with students in grade 11 and 12. And what we're trying to do is show the creativity that's involved in the design process and connect science, technology, engineering, and math to skills like creativity, collaboration, and creating that positive social impact in our communities. And so we want to be able to make engineering, STEM fields more equitable and inclusive by showing youth the benefits of their own diversity, their diverse knowledge, skills, and experiences in the design process. So our call to action for you this evening is to think about what you'll do to make youth engagement in STEM more relevant and motivating. And we want you to think a little bit about what part of this workshop maybe helped inspire that action. So again, if there's anything you want to share in the chat, please let us know. So we've always loved to hear what people took away from the workshop. And, you know, if you have any other ideas on what to include to, you know, to help inspire participants in future, that's always welcome as well. Just give you a few minutes if there's anything. Favorite part of the workshop, put it that way. There was anything that stood out to you. When we do this in person, we do our prototyping with physical materials. So craft, kind of craft materials where students are actually building physical prototypes. And that's always a lot of fun.
I was really inspired by the STEM flower, where like we got a lot of different ideas, and then how through having discussion about one idea leads to thinking about another idea, kind of again emphasizing the collaborative or the yes and nature of this kind of brainstorming and collaborating. And that it was really neat to see the ideas that were added at the end were not ones that I thought of or would have thought of at the beginning. So kind of seeing how by getting all those ideas out there, it kind of can prompt you to think of other things.
Yeah.
We have in the comments, we see, I like the storyboarding method of prototyping. The collaborative adding of pictures would be good for students who have a hard time verbalizing their ideas.
Yeah. And that's another thing we talk about is building to think, right? It's not just a way of communicating. I mean, that's an important part of it, but also just a different way of thinking, sort of thinking with your hands as well. So yeah, thank you. Okay. So before we wrap up, we wanted to just take a moment to thank all of the sponsors. So we've got a few slides so there have been a number of contributors to the NEM events this month. So Humber being the lead partner, we have a number of different champion partners here. Ally partners on this slide, and also our advocate partners. And then, hold on, just before we wrap it up, we wanted to take, ask you to take just one more minute. We've got one more question in our next Slido questionnaire. Oh, and I see something has come up in the chat, so.
I think that was me.
Oh, that was you. Thank you. Slido.com. Okay. I'm just going to make sure we've got the next poll running here. So one question in our Slido poll: how much did this program help you connect engineering to creating positive social and environmental impact in the community? And it's just a 5-point rating scale. So if you don't mind just filling out that before we wrap up tonight.
Andrew, I'm not sure it's live.
Oh, hold on.
Or how to access it. I'm still seeing the second question that we did.
Okay.
Oh, it's up now. I can see.
Okay, good. Okay. Perfect.
These are anonymous as well, so feel free to give us your honest opinion. We appreciate being able to learn from it and continuing to improve upon it.
Our contact details are also on the last slide. So if there's anything you want to share.
Do you want to share that slide again, Andrea, just in case anyone wants to take a screenshot or write it down?
Okay, hold on. So here's our last slide. So our website is upforthechallenge.ca. You can email us at contact@upforthechallenge.ca. And huge thank you to National Engineering Month.
And you guys for participating.
Yes, definitely. Fun. Kind of going through here. Make sure. Oh, and the other, I also wanted to say, special thank you to OSPE, to the Ontario Society for Professional Engineers. They are the ones who organized the NEM event this year. We've been participating for the last few years. So thank you very much to them and all of the different partners who made this possible. So thank you for joining us tonight.